Cruel retribution. It took me a little over an hour to drive from Atlanta to LJ. I couldn't help but admire my wife's tenacity in driving that route every Saturday. I guess the love was good. Maybe, just maybe it was more than that. I didn't know because I never asked her. I do know for a fact that Darlene dated Clayton Mankey at his cabin in LJ for over 6 months. We were very well known in the Atlanta social world because my wife was interested in charity work. She insisted that we attend openings, banquets, and fundraisers for anything that came up. This required not only my attention, but my money as well. I loved my wife, but I had reached my limit. After rather expensive weddings for our 2 daughters, I had hoped to relax a little. Darlene, however, needed more than that, so she began looking for ways to indulge her ego elsewhere. She met Clay Mankey at one of her fundraising events. I think I realized this from that very first night, but never bothered to confirm my suspicions until months later. If she had tried to meet him in town, it would have been a disaster. She was too well known to sneak into the hotel. Besides, she wouldn't go to the motel or his apartment under any circumstances. The cabin was perfect for them. After a long drive, I reached a 1-lane dirt road that led about 3 kilometers through the mountains to a log and stone cottage. Clayton had a lot of money. He was a contractor who specialized in large government projects. Besides making money, he apparently knew how to invest or use it wisely. Most of the land between the paved road and the cabin belonged to Clayton. I'm sure he had plans for the future. I drove up to the cabin in my car. There was something I needed to do, and it needed to be done quickly. With small wire cutters, I cut the telephone wires coming out of the box and leading into the cabin. I carefully tucked the ends of the wires into the holes so it wouldn't be noticeable that they had been cut. There was no cell phone service in the vicinity of the cabin. Now, there was no landline phone either. 20 minutes later, I was back on the main road. It was overcast the whole way. Darlene hadn't asked where I was going when I left early. I knew she would be leaving in about an hour, as usual. We never questioned each other about such things. I think it was a sign that our marriage was falling apart. Where the road to the cabin turned off, there was a gas station with a diner. Actually, it wasn't really a gas station, just a diner with several pumps in front of it. I lucked out and took a booth near the entrance with a good view. After about a half hour, a big black Hummer showed up on the road. Clayton always liked to arrive in style. Gas prices meant nothing to him. 5 minutes later, Darlene pulled off the road in her Lexus GX 470, and then it started to rain. It wasn't a regular rain, but one of those rains that goes on all day and never stops. I needed to get on the road as soon as possible before the road became impassable. I'm sure Clayton wasn't worried about muddy roads, but Darlene's Lexus wouldn't fit so well. It didn't matter at that point because they weren't going anywhere. What struck me about this meeting was the timing. Tonight we had a fundraiser to save a Brazilian 3-toed sloth. I'm pretty sure that's not what it was for, but it was something just as frivolous. She had been planning and preparing for over 3 months, but still found time to sneak out on the day of the event to see her lover. I have to admit that she did a great job organizing the event. Even if she hadn't been there, everything would have been fine. My car wasn't as reliable on the road as Clayton's Hummer, or as sleek as Darlene's Lexus, but it would get me where I needed to go if I wasn't hanging around doing nothing. I paid the bill and followed my wife and her lover up the hill. Actually, the climb wasn't that steep. It was just that the road was pretty damn winding. Trying to bulldoze a road in a mountain like this is not easy. You have to navigate the terrain whenever possible, and that's not always easy. It was raining relentlessly. I got halfway to the hut and decided to stop at a place where I could turn around. The parka protected me from the rain, but by the time I got there, it was getting a little stuffy inside. Darlene and her lover had been in the cabin for about 30 minutes. I was sure she was going to make this a shorter visit than usual, so I got right to work. In fact, it didn't take me very long at all. All I did was cut the valve stems on both cars. There was no way they were going to fix and change the tires today. By the time the rains are over, the roads will be so bad that no tow truck driver in their right mind would even try to get there. Their only option would be to walk to the diner and find some alternative form of transportation. Of course, they wouldn't even realize what was happening until they were done making love. They didn't have a landline or cell service. If he had internet access, it was probably through a phone line. Of course, he could have had a satellite phone as well. I had to take that chance. I was done. It was still raining. 20 minutes later, I was on the 575 bus back to Atlanta. My prank had no real reason, but I just felt mean. Darlene and I had been together since college. I had moved to Atlanta from Pennsylvania to take a job at one of the most prestigious accounting firms in the state. In less than 10 years, I had my own accounting firm specializing in the food service industry. We handled accounting, payroll, taxes, and even retirement programs. Some of our clients went national, and we went with them. Our lifestyle grew along with the amount of money I was making. Sometimes I felt like I was having a hard time keeping up with everything. All was well until Darlene decided to improve her sex life. Of course, I could be wrong. Clayton was actually richer than me. I wasn't sure what Darlene was interested in, his money or his body. I had to admit that he was handsomer than me and seemed to be in better shape. I guess working on a construction site helps you be fitter than sitting at a desk all day. That asshole had more hair than me. I mean, I haven't gotten to the point where I have to rebraid my hair yet, but it's not as thick as it used to be. I really didn't care why she did it. I just wished she hadn't. Tonight promised to be great. I couldn't wait to see if Darlene was coming or not. If she arrived before the end, she would be flustered and out of sorts. Like I said, there was no reason to do what I did. I got to the I-75 freeway and the rains were still coming down. I was going to leave Atlanta right after the party. All the arrangements had been made well in advance. 2 months ago, I sold the business for cash and a 20-year interest in the profits. 3 weeks ago, Darlene signed the papers to sell the house to a close colleague of mine. He was aware of my situation and was more than willing to handle any difficulties that might arise from the sale. He paid me $1 million in cash for a house that was worth 3 times that amount. Darlene thought she was signing papers to refinance the mortgage. There was no mortgage. The rest of my preparations consisted of closing accounts, credit cards, investments, and retirement policies. We had a few collectibles in our house that I had no problem selling beforehand. In leaving, I was going to take Darlene's jewelry with me. I wasn't going to leave her with $500,000 worth of goodies that I had bought. Clayton Mankey was another problem. In addition to being rich, he was well connected both locally and throughout the state. Although he wasn't one of my clients, I had no problem getting data on my adversary. I assigned a small team of my best employees to gather what they could about his businesses. It was standard procedure for Clayton to win bids on government projects and make a decent profit. The big problem was that the ledgers didn't match. The school district project would cost them $3 million, but Mankey Enterprises would indicate they were only paid $2 million. Clayton was able to easily pocket $1 million, minus a few kickbacks. No one ever compared the two figures to each other. There was no way I was going to let Clayton get in trouble with state or local authorities because they were just as guilty as he was. The IRS, however, was extremely interested. Not only were they planning to ruin poor Clayton, but they were going to reward me. At that point, I wasn't sure I could get it, but maybe if I was lucky, it would work out. By the time I got to Atlanta, the rains had intensified. I figured it would be another 2 or 3 hours before Darlene and Clayton realized their dilemma. I needed to get ready for the party. When I got home, the waiters and other party-goers were busy. Darlene had planned to invite over 200 people. Fortunately, the house was big enough to accommodate them. I just smiled and waved to the workers. They were professionals, and I had no intention of interfering. I stood under the hot shower for a long time and began to gather the last of my things. Darlene would miss her jewelry. I also cleaned out my personal safe. I was glad I had a small collection of gold coins. The Subaru was parked in the garage, so at least I didn't have to get wet while I loaded it up. The guests had hung long plastic slides all over the house. The day was drawing toward evening, but the lack of sunshine and abundance of clouds made it seem like night. It was pouring rain. By 5 o'clock, I was fully dressed in my evening tuxedo. My daughters and their husbands arrived early to make sure everything was going according to plan. They both asked where their mother was, and I just shrugged. When my phone rang, the first guests arrived. It was my loving wife. "Robert, I'm sorry, but I'm having some car trouble. I'll be home as soon as I can. Is everything all right?" "Where are you? I'll come and get you." No. Stay there with the guests. I'll try to get home as soon as I can. I'm so sorry." "What happened to the car?" That damn thing cost me over 50 grand. I expected the car to be reliable for that kind of money. I've already arranged for a service station to take care of it. You got nothing to worry about. Damn it, Darlene! Where the hell have you been? Robert, take it easy. It's not important. It's important that our guests are taken care of. There's no way she was going to tell me where she was or who she was with. Are you alone, or is someone with you? I'm alone, but I'm fine. For God's sake, stop worrying about me. I'll be fine. Both my daughters were relieved to hear that their mother was okay. I smiled to myself as I pictured her walking from the cabin to the highway in the rain and mud. That rain had been sent by a heavenly angel. Darlene must have felt miserable at that moment. Miserable, soaked, dirty, and tired. About an hour later, the phone rang again. I had to apologize to my guests and go out into the lobby. Robert, what the hell is going on? I've submitted 3 different credit cards to the renter, and they've all been declined. I can't rent a car with a credit card. Why don't you just call a cab? An exasperated sigh sounded on the other end of the wire. It's too far for a cab. I don't want any trouble, Robert. I just need to know what to do about the credit card problem. I probably won't be able to solve it until Monday. Why don't you just go home with Clayton? There was silence on the other end of the line. I couldn't even hear her breathing. I waited a few seconds, and then I heard her hang up. She never answered my question. The evening went pretty well. The girls had to leave because of their babysitters. When Darlene walked in, there were still about 10 guests there. She looked terrible. Her hair was as disheveled and dirty as her clothes. The rain had washed away most of the dirt, but the red-brown stains remained. I stood, smiling, with a mug of beer in my hand for the first time that evening. From the way she was walking, it looked like the heel on one of her shoes had broken. She kicked them off and grabbed a drink from one of the trays on the buffet table. You did it, didn't you? You asshole. I took a big sip of my beer and smiled. You're going to pay for this. I swear you're going to pay for it. The waiters were busy trying to clean up when our last guests left. They looked at her, but strangely enough, no one said anything. I'm glad to see you made it home safe and sound. I stayed behind to let you know I was leaving. I couldn't have left if I wasn't sure you were okay. What do you mean, leaving? That's what it means. I sold the business, sold the house, and closed all my accounts. That's why your credit cards weren't working. Darlene threw the glass across the room. It shattered against the wall, much to the dismay of the janitors. You stupid fool. Remember, half of everything belongs to me. I'm not going to let you screw me over. I worked as hard as you to get where we are. I've earned half, and I'll get it. I finished my beer and carefully placed the empty glass on the table. Okay, sweetheart, you'll only get half of everything if I get divorced. I'm not going to. You do what you have to do. I had to walk over 2 hours in the rain and mud to get to the road. 2 goddamn hours, all because of you. What were you doing out there, honey? Why did you come all the way to LJ to spend the day with Clayton Mankey when you could have just slept with him right here at home? God knows I wouldn't have cared. You're an asshole. You're insensitive and worthless. I hate you. Well, I'm glad that's over with. I have a midnight flight. If you need to get in touch with me, give me a call at the address. I'm sorry, I just remembered there's no place you can call me. I suggest you fire your domestic help because you won't have the ability to pay them. Besides, the couple who bought the house are moving out at the end of next week. You might want to look for a place of your own. I don't recommend going to the Claytons. He doesn't have long to live here. Maybe one of your daughters will take you in. What do you mean Clayton won't be around anymore? Why would he be gone? He's on top of the world. I smiled as I walked out the door for the last time. My accountants and lawyers made sure all my taxes were determined and paid. From the government's perspective, I was leaving the company clean. All I was interested in now was getting as far away from Darlene as possible. It wasn't that I didn't have anything to share with her. It was that I didn't want to share with her. I had a lot of options, but I decided not to choose. I made a list of places that interested me, and it seemed appropriate to check them all out. You could spend a year in each place. I decided to start with Belize and move on from there. After 5 years, I would have a pretty clear idea of where I wanted to live. I had a few people who were more than willing to keep me updated on how things were going back home. 2 weeks after I arrived in Ambergris Caye, I made a few phone calls. The first was addressed to my oldest daughter, Grace. "Dad, Mom is furious. Bet and I have tried to talk to her, but she refuses to explain anything to us. The only thing we've been able to get out of her is that you stole all her jewelry and left her without money or credit cards. She hasn't been home in the last few days. We don't know where she is." "Have you tried calling her?" "I think her cell phone was disconnected." Oh, that's right. I forgot. The house has all the utilities down, so that's probably why she's not there. She could be with Clayton." "Who the hell is Clayton?" "Oh, I'm sorry. I guess she didn't tell you. Clayton Mankey is your mother's lover." Clayton Mankey. He's been all over the news the last few weeks. He's being hunted by the FBI and some other people. He was arrested once, but he made bail and disappeared. What's Mom doing with him?" "I'm not sure. It's either out of love or money. If he's missing, I'm guessing your mom is with him. I promised Grace I'd keep in touch with her and Bet. I made 4 more calls, and the information was the same. No one knew where Darlene was, and no one knew where Clayton was. It seemed obvious that they were together. Clayton could walk away from his business and still have enough money to live the rest of his life. Of course, with the way his business was going, that wouldn't have happened in the good old USA. I spent a restless night. I had 2 dives scheduled for the next day. I needed something to occupy myself to pass the time, so I decided to go scuba diving. It was right after the first dive. It rained. Not just rain, but a real downpour in Chattahoochee. We sat in the dive boat and waited for it to pass. All I could think about was the cabin at Ellijay. That was not a good sign. The second dive was a little shorter than the first. When we got back to shore, it was still raining. The pier was a short walk from my apartment. Before heading back, I had a quick bowl of clam chowder. The rain continued to pour. It seemed like Hector was always on duty. He was the doorman in our apartment building. I wasn't sure, but I think he worked solely for tips. I had no problem handing him some change if he did something that warranted it. We got along just fine. "Mr. Terrell, you don't have any more diving today?" "Mr. Terrell: No, but I will tomorrow." "Mr. Terrell: You had 2 visitors this morning. I told them you wouldn't be back until later this afternoon. I think they'll be back again." Now that was strange. No one knew I was here, and I hadn't made any friends since I arrived. "Do you remember their names, Hector?" "No, sir, but I did better than that." Hector took out his cell phone and pressed a few buttons. It was a great shot. They didn't pose for it and didn't seem to know he'd taken it. Clayton was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and Darlene was wearing a large straw hat with sagging brim. My wife and her lover found me and came to visit. It's amazing what a man can accomplish if he has enough money. I slipped Hector a 20 and headed for my apartment. I didn't have a lot of stuff to pack, so I had time to call the U.S. Embassy. They confirmed that they were indeed interested in Mr. Mankey. Not only was he wanted by the IRS, but the passport office wanted to know what documents he was using. He had to give up his passport to get out on bail. 20 minutes later, I was on my way to the San Pedro airport. The small airport suited me a little better. It rained the whole way. U.S. officials would be waiting for Clayton at the apartment. Extradition to the States was inevitable. They showed no interest in Darlene, so I assumed they would just leave her with no money or credit cards. I wondered if she had a return ticket. 2 days later, I was comfortably ensconced in my new villa in Phuket. I was afraid my life would be boring without a job and a family. I was wrong. It wouldn't be long before Darlene and Clayton would find out where I'd gone. This time, I'll be ready. I would also be vigilant. I had planned to take a walk on the beach to admire the sunset, but I had to change my mind. It was raining. It was the rain of Chattahoochee. It had been sent by an angel. I hoped Clayton was as smart as he seemed. It's interesting that he decided to take revenge when he could have just walked away. The next few years would be fun. I wanted to eat dinner, but I couldn't. It rained, the end.